Hey everyone, this is Jake Clark from Fargo 3D Printing. What I'm going to be showing you today is how to install your silicone heater blocks onto your Replicator 2X. Make sure your machine is turned off and unplugged before proceeding. The tools that will be required for today's install are a metric hex key set, pliers, side cutters, a crescent wrench or small wrench, a socket set, and a Phillips screwdriver. The first thing that you're going to do is actually take out the 4 screws holding the acrylic door together, and you're going to set that assembly aside. This allows easier access to the extruder head and makes things a little bit easier. Once you've taken off the front acrylic plate, you're going to pull your extruder assembly all the way towards the front. You're going to cut off the zip tie and remove the plastic holder. Once you're done with that, you're going to go underneath the extruder assembly, remove the 2 hex bolts. That way you can remove the extruder assembly from the gantry. Once you've removed the screws from the bottom, you can take the extruder assembly off the gantry and put it on top of the machine. This will allow easy access to the parts we're going to replace. Next, identify which side you're going to replace. If you're going to replace both sides, you'll follow the next steps twice. We'll now remove the 2 fan bolts, which holds down the fan guard to the fan to the heatsink, and the heatsink to the bar mount assembly. One thing you'll notice when you take the fan guard off is that there's no letters on the fan itself. This will be important for when you reinstall the fans. What we're actually going to do here is pick up the extruder assembly, turn it around so that we can actually unplug the motors and remove the motor from the assembly. Once you've removed the stepper motor, you'll actually see a set screw in the back. What we'll need to do is actually loosen this set screw. That way the thermal barrier tube will come free of the bar mount assembly. Once the set screw is loose, make sure that you straighten out the thermocouple wire. That way it does not get caught, cut, or otherwise broken while removing the assembly. Once you have the thermocouple wire straight, what you'll do is pull down on the heater block so the thermal barrier tube gets released from the bar mount assembly. Once you have removed the heater block from the bar mount assembly, we're actually going to loosen the heater cartridge set screw so we can remove that out of the heater block. Once the set screw is loose, you can remove the heater cartridge. After removing the heater cartridge, grab a larger hex key and put that through the hole of the heater cartridge. This is going to allow leverage so that you can actually unscrew the nozzle. After placing that through the hole, grab a socket set and loosen the nozzle. After removing the nozzle, you'll want to loosen the thermocouple either by hand, a small wrench, in our case a pliers. That way we can actually unscrew that from the heater block. While removing the thermocouple from the heater block, make sure that you do not twist the wire. If the wire gets twisted, it could potentially cause damage to the thermocouple, which would require a replacement. When you're done removing the thermocouple, we'll actually remove the thermal barrier tube. To do this, we'll either use a small crescent wrench, a small wrench, or pliers to get that out of the heater block. Now grab your Replicator 2X silicone heater block replacement and we'll start installing that. First, we're going to screw in the thermal barrier tube. The proper installment height is if you take the notch from the thermal barrier tube and line up the bottom with the top surface of the heater block. Depending on which kit you ordered, you may have to remove the nozzle prior to installing the thermal barrier tube. Now take the nozzle and screw it down by hand until it stops. Next, grab your socket set and tighten down on the nozzle until it can't move anymore. Once the nozzle is tight, try unscrewing the thermal barrier tube by hand. If the thermal barrier tube unscrews, what you'll have to do is unscrew the nozzle a couple turns, screw in the thermal barrier a couple turns, and then screw back on the nozzle until it's tight. What actually happened there is that your thermal barrier tube wasn't close enough to your nozzle, leaving a gap between the two, where backing the nozzle off, bringing the barrier tube farther down into the block, and then tightening the nozzle back up into the block will actually allow the nozzle and the thermal barrier tube material to actually mush together and squish together. Once you have secured the nozzle and the thermal barrier tube, screw on the thermocouple by hand. The last few turns can be used by a crescent wrench or pliers in our case. That way the thermocouple is snug to the heater block. After that, we'll put the heater block back into the bar mount. Once you've pushed the heater block into the bar mount assembly, grab your alignment jig. The alignment jig snaps onto the bar mount assembly like so. Make sure that the snap fits are fully seated on either side of the bar mount assembly, otherwise you'll get misalignment. Align the 2 nozzles. The 2 nozzles should be touching the jig. If you are experiencing that the nozzle you are not working on is extremely tight to the jig, what you'll have to do is remove the other stepper motor, loosen the set screw, that way the heater block can freely move, and then re-level both nozzles. When leveling the nozzle, make sure that you push down on the thermal barrier tube so it butts up with the bottom of the jig. Once it butts up to the bottom of that jig, tighten the set screw. After tightening the set screw, put the heater cartridge in, tighten that down, and then you'll actually take the thermocouple wire and press that down into the slot. This ensures that the stepper motor and filament tensioner do not interfere with the wire. Put the stepper motor back on and then plug it in. Put the extruder assembly on the top of the machine, then you'll replace the heatsink, the spacers, the fan guard, and the 2 hex bolts. Now make sure that your fan has black on the top or facing towards you or facing up. If there are letters showing, that is actually installed the wrong way. Tighten down on the hex bolts, put the extruder assembly back on the gantry, and tighten it down to the gantry system. Once the screws are tightened on the gantry system, now you'll go back and put the acrylic door back on. And that is how you install a silicone heater block onto your Replicator 2X. If you have any questions, put those down in the comments or shoot us an email at support@fargo3dprinting.com and we'll gladly get those answered for you.